Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to yet another session of Weekend Conversations. Today, we have a special guest, a dear friend of mine, whom I know for more than a decade, I think more than 12, 13 years now. His name is Navina CK. He's a software engineer and he's managing director of Kartavya IT Solutions. He's based out of Mysore and Bangalore. He was previously more in Mysore, I think now more based in Bangalore. And he's a good friend and he's a very sincere devotee of Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda. I remember that when I first met him through a mutual friend some 13, 14 years back, the first thing the mutual friend who introduced just told me was Navina is a very devout, very serious follower of the works of Swami Vivekananda, of the teachings of Swami Vivekananda. I still remember I met him in his office. Navina, very warm welcome to you on behalf of Advaita Academy and our viewers on our session today.
Thank you, Nitin. It's very nice to see you also and to talk with you after a long time. I've been looking forward to an opportunity like this to have a conversation with you, and it's nice to be here.
Yes, Navina has also has recently brought with a book called Be One with God, and it's a curation of quotes by Swami Vivekananda on different topics, on different themes that is aimed to help a spiritual seeker. Those who are into Vedanta, those who are starting on the road to spirituality. Navina, you do have a copy of the book? You can just show it to
Yeah,
the viewers.
yeah. Can you see this?
Yeah,
This is
yeah,
the
yeah.
Be One with God. This is the compilation of the timeless wisdom of Swami Vivekananda. And if somebody wants to know why it is given the title Be One with God, so actually, it is Swami Vivekananda's message to mankind, basically, and he has said that he's going to inspire mankind till everybody realizes they are one with God. I take it very seriously, basically. So sometimes it may look figurative, but it's not very figurative. Exactly, it's what actually is happening. I see, having gone to many places in India and watching the activities that are going on in different fields. So, and basically, this is the Advaita ideal also, right? To be one with that thou art, Tatvamasi. So, this is
Yes.
actually the same theme and Vivekananda's lasting message to mankind. And I
Mm.
think this will be relevant to everybody because that's all we are striving for, basically.
So, yeah, I know that you have been, following Swami Vivekananda for a long time, and as I just said, I know when I first met you, that was the first I was described about you. So my question is, why Vivekananda? And how is Vivekananda's message relevant to us today? And how did your introduction to Swami Vivekananda happen? How and when? At what point of your life? So it's a two-part question, three-part question actually. Why Vivekananda? How is teachings relevant today? And how did your journey how were you introduced to Vivekananda? At what point of your life?
Yeah, I think I will take your last question first. How I was introduced to Vivekananda, because that will give me a base to start on. See, like we had a CET exam, after plus two. We had in 2000, that was probably we had a 3 or 4 months gap. There was something was going on politically, so the CET counseling was postponed. We started only towards, I think, late September or sometime, something like that. So that period of 4 months, I used to go to library every day. I tell you that I have read the best-selling books like Robert Sculler, Norman Vincent Peale, all these big names which had titles like million copies sold and all that. I was a very avid reader before that also, but especially during those 4 months, I had no other job to do basically. So I used to go to the library in Saraswatipuram and take out those books and read. Almost every day I used to read one book at least. And I read all those books and felt that like there was one central idea they used to take and stretch it up to an entire book, and that actually disgusted me, to be honest. I mean, the whole book is talking about only one idea. That was it. So then I didn't read books after that. And
Which book was this one?
there were many books that based Norman Vincent Peale, that Robert Sculler. I don't remember the titles of those books, but they're best-selling books basically in the market those times. Uh, there are many books you see, like there are million copies sold, like how to influence people, how to make friends. All those are many books are there, the foreign author books basically. And in India, basically, we always refer to the foreigners when you read any English books. So we take them as the standard, right? So when I went to the library also, I didn't see many English writers written by the Indian authors. So all these best-selling books, that self-help books, all those books are basically from the foreign authors. So anyway, I had interest in philosophy to start with. They say Vivekananda himself has said, if you go to a library or if you buy many books in your library, you will read only those books for which you are fit. So that is by karma. So I'm surprised. I read one book by M.K. Hassan, I think his name, Making of Man. It was a wonderful book, a very small book. I read in the central library basically. So, and also I read few books by Betty Shine, Mind Waves, Mind Magic, Mind to Mind, Mind Power, like that. She had got 3 books and all. And also there's a bit of clairvoyance and healing, Reiki and all that stuff. So I was actually interested in this kind of literature to begin with. And I went through the other book. Actually, I think Betty Shine was quite good, to be honest, to be fair to her. MKSN was also quite good, but if you come back to this, that what do you call personality development books, self-help books, which tend to make man more focused, give him a direction, make him strong. Books which are labeled like that, basically, that will give you a direction in life, something like that. So those books, when I read them, anyway, I liked those ideas in the beginning, but towards the end, it's like repeating the same idea again and again. So it was after all this, once my friend Sudarshan, I think it was, he just brought a small book of Vivekananda in my 3rd semester, I think. So I told him, I have read many big books. I don't think I am going to be interested in this small book. Actually, I told him this. And he said in Kannada, Idu ninge vadiyutte. That means it's going to hit you strongly. I actually felt that when I went through the very small book, Call to the Nation, and whatever these people are talking about in one book, the Dale Carnegie and all, Swami Vivekananda actually told those things in a single paragraph or 2 paragraphs at the most. So that small book which I read, it was almost like what I read in 2-3 months in all those best-selling books and all. Then I really felt that this is something to focus on, because there was actual strength, and not about religion basically. Forget about religion, not talking about religion, not talking about God, but the strength in the words themselves and how it can be relevant to you. And that's very important to us. It's no point in looking at it God objectively. So it's more of a subjective sense. So what strength you derive from the literature that you read, how it can influence your life, how it can make you think strongly. I think I have been very selective in reading books. I read only those books which I think I can relate to. I don't like fictitious kind of a books. So when I read Vivekananda, I felt that whatever he says appealed to me. There was a lot of strength in those books. I think after starting to study Vivekananda, I've not gone to many other literature. Usually, I don't usually read other books, but I read, himself has said, read the books on Vedanta in general, the Upanishads and all, and related to that, Bhagavad Gita and all that, of course, but not any other books. So I'm more streamlined into my reading these days. And I find that's the right approach, I personally feel. And it continues to inspire me. And even if I read this book today, I was also going through some of these sayings in this book. And I know they are relevant. So that's the first part of your question, like how I was introduced to Vivekananda. And secondly, Vivekananda's relevance at today's age is very relevant. Probably he is the relevant person currently, if you ask me about it. See, there are different people around us. Some of them are great musicians, great writers, great politicians also we have, scientists also we have. So they all contribute in their own way towards the human progress. There's no denying that part. But Swami Vivekananda was one such person who is guiding the collective human destiny at a higher direction. So when it's very difficult to imagine a person like him, because when we look at our own lives, we are totally, we have one individuality of our own. We have a family, we have a circle. Usually, whatever we do is limited to our identities, around us also. And that's what usually all of us are like that. Let me put it like that. But people like Vivekananda, they are of different material altogether. So his gurus told that he is born to give direction to mankind. And when he said that, he was simply not making a figurative statement. He actually meant it. And it took time for me to understand that Swami Vivekananda actually came to guide us. So when I go through his literature myself, when I see his thoughts, and so universal, so broad, and I always felt that Vivekananda's literature is very good because of one particular characteristic I've identified in that. Usually, what happens when we have leaders, if you look at any leader of a religious sect or a religion itself, they represent their particular sect. Suppose you take up, I don't want to take any name, but in general, it is like that. But in Vivekananda, we see two aspects. One is that every individual should be recognized. Individual, in the sense, individual himself plus the sect he represents. It can be dualism, qualified monism, or Advaita itself. It could be so many sects within Hinduism we have. And also, if you're going beyond Hinduism, look at Christianity, Islam, or even if you look at atheists or scientists. So we need to have a philosophy which will include all these people. So we just can't have one philosophy for one religion or one sect. So Swami Vivekananda was universal in the broadest sense because his philosophy includes everybody. So basically, his philosophy is centered around the divinity of every soul. So you talk of Advaita, so you talk that you are the divine self unfolding yourself basically. So that same divine self is present as everything. Basically, the whole universe is that. So unless you base a philosophy on this universal oneness, a solidarity of the universe, so we cannot be united. So Swami Vivekananda's scope extends beyond that of Hinduism, extends beyond the so-called Orthodox religion. So it covers up everyone. And if you look at any comparative literature till date, of course, Swami Vivekananda himself said that whatever he has said is nothing but the Upanishads. He has actually repeatedly said that. So Upanishads anyway has the culmination of all our spiritual literature, but that had to be made more relevant to mankind. He himself said that he's, basically he has come to make the dry literature, more juicy kind of a thing, and so even the child can understand that. So in a way that a child can also understand. So this was the scope of his work. So if you look at Upanishads as the culmination of all the Vedas, the end of the Vedas, the highest knowledge of mankind, that Tatvamasi was uttered long back, but that had to be made relevant to mankind.
Yes.
And its scope is universal. And the way to do it, and Vivekananda just didn't say that Tatvamasi, that's well and good, it's there. But how to actually realize that you are that? And that, of course, we also had in the Gita that Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and all. But Swami Vivekananda made it sort of more relatable to people. He brought it, to their daily lives. So I personally believe that Vivekananda is the way for all of us, not just because he's someone I like, but even if you look at it objectively, I have seen it objectively, basically. I know just not because I have personal liking for him, because he has got millions of followers. I am one of them, but I can understand why he came, and his message is relevant, and I believe that everybody should actually follow him. And there's no harm, and there's nothing like no hero worship. He himself was impersonal, so it's very difficult to get a person like him. I mean, it's very, very fortunate because even today I'm talking about Vivekananda. I feel I'm very fortunate. And to mankind to have a person like him who was so selfless, like Buddha in the past, or so many other leaders in the current era, I don't see beyond Vivekananda. It's just not a personal fancy because of the facts. And if I take 2 minutes of time extra for that, I'll just give you two examples. Sir.
Yeah.
There is one organization in HD Kote, Mysore nearby. That's Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement. Probably, I think you are also associated with them. So they have a branch in Mysore also. So they have a school in near HD Kote. It's called Sargur. I think it's Kenchanahalli, a small village, a tribal place. So these people,
yes.
Gone. Yeah. So see how Vivekananda's message has inspired a group of doctors. They gone into the depths of the jungle, go to the tribal area. They started a school there. You imagine children coming to school for the first time, and basically tribal people. So that is in HD Kote, I am saying. And recently I had been to a place called Madhya Pradesh. In Madhya Pradesh, a place called Sandalpur, and also in West Bengal, there's an organization called Parivar. So they have gone to more than 150 tribal colonies, and they're
Mhm.
educating the people there. And this is
Mhm.
inspired by Vivekananda's message.
Wonderful. Mhm.
Okay, so this is just two instances. There are so many instances like this. So more and more we recognize how that undercurrent is working, the Vivekananda's undercurrent is working. We will be able to place our work better, because we all want some reference to work on, some leader we want. And we are looking here and there, everybody you look at, they disappoint you basically, because they don't meet the standard. The ideal they can't represent, because to be universal requires superhuman capability. I myself have been working with few organizations, and I thought maybe my ideal is here, my ideal is there. But I find that human beings, I mean, normal human beings cannot be the ideal. So they're going to make mistakes. And it's a great fortune that somebody like Vivekananda is already there for us. And his philosophy is broad and universal, socially, spiritually, economically. You look at it whichever way you want. And
Mhm.
even the universality, if you talk about it, uh, there's not anything that he has not addressed. So it's something in it for everyone. Maybe I am representing Vivekananda in one of the aspects. There are people like Swami Ranganathananji Maharaj, Saropriyananji currently, who are great scholars, who are, by Vivekananda, they are inspired, they follow his tradition. And if you look at service, I told you Vinayak Lohani from Parivar, Dr. Balasubramaniam, Jaidev, and there are so
Mhm.
many host number of them. They represent Vivekananda in a social sphere. And like spiritually, socially, religiously, and Kanyakumari Vivekananda Kendra, of course, is named after Vivekananda himself. They work for the amelioration of Hindu religion. Economically, the wonderful thoughts he has given to us for the youth is the inspiration. And well, I mean, there's still nothing more you can ask for. So,
Mhm.
and so there are so many
So,
reasons why I like,
uh,
yeah, specifically.
yeah. So, my second question is slightly connected to this. You have been studying Vivekananda very deeply. See, most of the people, I remember how I was introduced to Swami Vivekananda when I was in higher primary, high school, higher primary. It was through some quotes. I remember the first quote I read about him, and I was simply I was given a sticker of this quote when some of the monks, not the monks, I think some teachers from Rimse and Mysore, the B.Ed
Yes, yes,
they had
college, yeah.
come. Yeah, the quote read, "All the power is within you, can do anything and everything." So I used to I had stuck it on my wall, and every day, first thing in the morning, I used to read it, and it gave me enormous confidence. So, and I think most people are introduced to Vivekananda's thought through these quotes. But I also feel that most people, very large section of people, their interaction with Swami Vivekananda, with Vedanta, ends there, ends with those quotes, and they do not go beyond that. But I know that I know I have known you for a long time, and I know that you have studied the complete works of Swami Vivekananda. Perhaps many times you might have studied, and you have studied deeply. So I want to ask, what is would be your suggestion for the youngsters, for the people who want to study Vivekananda? Do you think there is a particular way that they have to approach the complete works that would be more beneficial to them, or should they start from the first page and end with the last page of the last volume, or how do you is there a method that you think is more useful to the people if they approach it?
I don't suggest people to take up complete works in the beginning, because that would look very complicated for them and they will not be able to relate to that. See, I was inspired to take up complete works on my own. After studying so many books on Swami Vivekananda, then I feel, let me go beyond this. Let me see what exactly he has said, how he has said it. Let me go into that. So that gave me a proper perspective to that, and I could understand it better.
Mm,
So I think it would depend on the person's interest also. Suppose you are an youngster, I would suggest you read his conversations and dialogue. There is a book on that. And suppose you're someone who like, yoga, meditation and all, take up Raja Yoga. Suppose someone you want to know the explanation of this universe, what is the religious and the philosophical explanation of this universe, go to Dhyana Yoga, read Practical Vedanta. And someone you are in a business or a school, a teacher, I suggest you read Karma Yoga. So someone want to social service, you want to uplift the country, Hindu religion, you are all doing that already. I suggest take up Colombo to Almora. That's one series of lectures he gave after coming back from the West. You are someone very spiritual, take up Inspire Talks. That is one series. You want to serve the country, go through the letters of Swami Vivekananda. So there are there are many books, and Ashram has done an incredible job. See, I want to tell about that. Today, say I am publishing this book for 350 rupees. This is a collection of Vivekananda's sayings. And I tell you, I got the Computers of Vivekananda in 2002, I think it was, for 300 rupees. The 8 books, they given it for 300 rupees. Highly subsidized price. And Ashram has done an incredible job, like to reach out to people in various ways. He told me got a sticker, right? So they prepare the stickers also. They give the labels also. So they themselves have done a wonderful work. It takes a lot of work, because if you go through one work by Mary Louise Burke, New Discoveries, she has compared 6 books on Swami Vivekananda, Women's in America. If you read that book, you'll actually feel touched, because for a foreigner to do so much of research on Swami Vivekananda, what he did from first to last, whenever he came to the West, 6 books she has compiled, it will move you to tears basically. So, I mean, I just want to tell you that how you can pick the literature that you like. I was suggested by Swami Nityastananji Maharaj to read those 6 books after I read Complete Works. So if you want to read Vivekananda's life, go to the Eastern and Western disciples. They have compiled this biography. Nikhilananji has also got a biography of Swami Vivekananda. In Kannada, we have 3 very famous books by Swami Purushothamananji Maharaj. So there are different books. I would suggest that youngster to go to the Ramakrishna Ashram bookstall probably. He's going to see many books. They have got wonderful books. Purushothamananji also brought one small book. I think it was Gospel of Strength. Recently, I went to the printer of that book. He told me that they have printed more than 4 lakh copies of that book so far. I myself had a copy of that book when I was there. So the small book Vidyutvani is also there. So my suggestion is, according to your interest, Vivekananda, I told you earlier, is there for everybody basically. Whether you are a religious person or you want to serve, you want to be just a successful person in your life, you don't want to bother about everything. Even you also can derive from Vivekananda a lot. So I would suggest to visit a bookstall, then take a look at those books, take whichever you like. That way you can start, and probably you can expand over time. I have spent a lot of time, so I had a special interest in this basically. So everybody may not have the same interest to go through a huge literature, but there's one thing that they can do. They can take Vivekananda's at least one aspect which will benefit themselves. There are 2 things here. When we read a book, either we read for simply kind of entertainment, sometimes just for time pass, or to have some kind of a thrill, something like that. And sometimes, we buy books just to make the author very happy, make him rich. Usually it happens like that. But Vivekananda literature is not like that. It is for you basically. The whole attention that he gave was to the individual. So it is for you to become strong, to express your divinity. So take it up in whichever way you like, whichever way makes you, express that divinity you have. So it's more subjective than being objective. So Vivekananda is for you. Go take him and use him to come up in life. So Vivekananda actually is for it's like a foundation on which you can stand and express yourself. And it's very hard for
Which books do you suggest for a student of Vedanta who wants to study Advaita Vedanta or the Upanishadic thoughts in a more depth, but the works of Swami Vivekananda, Swami Vivekananda's interpretation of the Upanishad?
The thing is, like, most of the things he said are actually based on this Upanishads only. Even then, if you ask me to point to certain books, I would definitely say Jnana Yoga. That's one entire book is there. Then Practical Vedanta, I think, is a must read for everybody basically. Basically, that is where you talk about this, that thou art, Tattvamasi, one existence appearing as many. So these are the thoughts we have in a germ form basically. But Vedanta is applying those thoughts in practice. And Vivekananda said these thoughts of Vedanta have been hidden in forest caves, and they have to be brought out and to be used by every individual and make it practical. So how to make it practical? And so that's very important also. One is philosophical aspect of that, just understand intellectually, and then how to actually apply it in life, because no philosophy is going to help us unless we are going to apply it in life. That's very important for us. So the practical Vedanta, I think, it's a must read. So first I will start with the Jnana Yoga, then the practical Vedanta. And there is one particular series of lectures from Colombo to Almora. There also Swamiji has gone into the Vedanta philosophy in depth. Just I want to quote one particular saying of his. He says like how that practical Vedanta can be. So what evil can there be when gods are playing with gods? Gods are working with gods. Gods are loving gods. The whole universe will be changed. So just a very simple sentence, but if you can understand that, you are God. I'm talking to people who are listening to this conversation. They are also gods. But if we can, deify our actions with that Godhead behind it, that is practical Vedanta basically. So I would suggest people to read practical Vedanta. Almost, I think he summarized the entire thing over there. See, we have the philosophical explanation, interpretation of Vedanta by so many scholars. We have enough of them. But what we want is the application of Vedanta, how it can improve us as people, how it can bring us together. So Vedanta's greatest application, Swamiji would say, is to make the universe one. So sometimes we take a great pride if somebody is we are better than somebody basically. That's people actually cherish that idea they're better than someone. But Vedantically it's all one. The whole universe is one. So what is our contribution then? To make people to realize their oneness. So there's no need for him to feel egoistic or that I am somebody greater. No. Swami Vivekananda said, if you think you are greater than an ant, you are mistaken. So in this creation of the Lord, everything is born equal. So these are the ideas you get. So that I say is practical Vedanta, Jnana Yoga, and even lectures from Colombo to Almora also. A good part of it deals with the Vedanta philosophy. And he had a disciple by name Sharat Chandra Chakravarti. He was his disciple, and he has recorded his conversations. If you go through them, there also, and he is pretty scholarly himself, Sharat Chandra. So he asked some great questions to Swamiji, and Swamiji answered them all. So I think even that would give you an insight into understanding of the Vedanta philosophy. So yeah, Jnana Yoga, practical Vedanta, this Colombo to Almora, then this conversations and dialogues. And if you have time enough, Inspire Talks. Inspire Talks is a must for everybody basically. It's very inspiring as it says. But there also you get, because he was explaining the Vedanta to the Western audience, so he was trying to explain it in a very basic terms, so we can get a lot of ideas from that also. Yeah, these are the works.
Yeah, while you were suggesting the books, you mentioned 3 books, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Raja Yoga. Is it Bhakti Yoga? Is it the Karma Yoga?
No, for the Advaita, is it? For the Advaita, I was mentioning.
No. As a whole, his writings, there is one on Jnana Yoga, there is one on Raja Yoga, and one on Karma Yoga, right?
On Bhakti Yoga also.
Is there a book on Bhakti Yoga as well?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, definitely.
So, yeah, so my question is, a lot of people, we are all exposed to these ideas today, especially in the internet age, wherein things are very easily accessible. But still, in the internet, as you know, lot of good things are there, but lot of nonsensical things are also there. So it's leading to kind of confusion. One of the important issues is, how are Jnana, Karma, and Bhakti, Raja Yoga, they're related. I mean, are they completely isolated silos, or should we take a comprehensive understanding that they are all interrelated and connected to each other? What is Swami Vivekananda's view on this? I mean, what is the vision he provides in these works, wherein he has dealt in detail about Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, and Raja Yoga in 4 different books?
Yes, actually, he summarized it himself in a beautiful one particular paragraph itself. He said, each soul is potentially divine. Just going back to that primary idea. The goal is to express this divinity. So take it one by one. Each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest this divinity. Do this either by work, that is Karma Yoga, or by worship, that's Bhakti Yoga, or by this psychic control, Raja Yoga, or by service, that is the Karma Yoga, basically. So we're talking of 4 things. One is by worship, that is the Bhakti Yoga, or by this intellectual pursuit, that is the Jnana Yoga. So you take up any of these 4 paths. You take one of them two of them, three of them, or four of them, all of them together. So he says you can do one by two or all of this. But the ideal is what? The ideal is to manifest the divinity. So it's no compartmentalized, so you to only do this or do that. So he himself said that the ideal man is the one in whom all the four yogas are synthesized. And he himself in the Ramakrishna mission, if you look at the emblem they have, so that emblem itself suggests that wavy waters, then you have that sarpa, that is the serpent around it, then you have the sun, you have the flower. So they represent dhyana, bhakti, karma yoga, and raja yoga. So he said you should combine in your life all this. And specifically he said for this particular age we should give emphasis on the karma yoga, because our country, we have been talking about bringing up our country, and that has to be done through karma yoga only. And Krishna also was very particular about that karma. That's what actually our country requires. So Swamiji was like for the harmony of all the yogas, but he said that in this particular age we should give special emphasis on the karma yoga, and that is necessary for the development of the country as a whole.
Wonderful. Let us return back to where we started, your journey into spirituality. And we discussed about how you were introduced to Swami Vivekananda's teaching. But yes, that happened long back. But what happened next? I mean, I'm sure our viewers would be interested. Uh, how did the Vedanta inspire you, and what has been your journey into Vedanta? I know a few things, like I know you have been associated with Ramakrishna Mission for a long time, and I have seen your Facebook posts about you have traveled across India, and you have traveled in the Himalayas. You have met a lot of people. So tell us about this, your journey into Vedanta as a whole, um, in a very personal sense, as well as in the sense of your activity and other things you have done.
Yeah. See, basically, Vedanta is the discovery of oneself. I look at it that way, basically, because that is the thing that matters to me, to know myself. Yeah. So, what kept me interested in the Vedanta was the idea of divinity only. So, when I read for the first time, each soul is potentially divine, I tell you, I understood nothing of that, but that I like that line. So something divine is there. So how do you separate the divine from the non-divine? So that is a big question. See, people, we all have certain limitations and samskaras that we cannot be very proud about. Some of the samskaras, we know that we have limitations. It could be anything. I'm not going specifically to my case or anybody's case, but we know that we have our limitations and that we cannot be very proud about them. But how do you separate yourself from them? That's the most important thing for any spiritual sadhaka, is to know his limitations and how to overcome them. I feel that is the unfolding of life. Life unfolds internally, basically. Externally, only we see it. But really, when you look at Sri Ramakrishna or Shankaracharya, or in a great spiritual sense, it is the internal growth that we, honor. Externally, they didn't even bother about all this, wealth and all that stuff. You can see they're monks, basically. So this unfolding of the divinity within by conquering nature, that internal nature that suppresses us down. So when you become conscious of limitations that you have, you want something to hold on to, basically, because that is the only support you have. And Vivekananda, of course, is a personal support. Of course, Sri Ramakrishna has always been the spiritual kind of, is like God for me. But as a philosophy, it's important, right? Because Sri Ramakrishna is still outside me. Vivekananda is outside me. They are persons outside me, right? So I am inside myself. So I need a philosophy, actually, to come out of my limitation, basically. So when I saw these thoughts, like each soul is potentially divine, and he said, in a man, however vile, does the divinity die? So even if you are the worst possible person, the divinity is not dead in you. And one particular line has impressed me a lot and kept me going. Based on the Vedanta itself, no life will be a failure. There is no such thing as failure in the universe. Man tumbles 100 times, falls 1,000 times, but in the end, he will realize that he is God. This basically interpreting the Vedanta and giving hope to every individual, however low you are going, whatever you might be, you need that support of one idea. And Vedanta gives that idea. It says you are divine. So whenever you come across any limitation, you may have some bad thoughts, you may have, and see, we have so many limitations. It wasn't to list them actually, but we are aware of them ourselves. We look at it subjectively. We know that no, I'm wrong in this. Something is not right about me. So, but you don't need to advertise to the world. Okay, I something wrong with me, but I should know it myself. I can overcome it. So, this Vedantic idea that you are God, that I think is fundamentally necessary for every individual. I'm saying this after many years of being into this, and I don't see any other idea which is as important as this particular idea. That's the Indian Vedantic idea that each soul is potentially divine. Vivekananda put it like that. So that is the idea that we can base our life upon. So only holding on to that idea, I feel an individual can really open up. Otherwise, he's not going to open up. See, where is the other strong basis on which you can base your life upon, except that you are God? Only when you say you're God, you're gone to the absolute. There's nothing beyond God, basically, in an absolute sense. So I feel I have been kept in touch with the Vedanta because of that one particular idea that you are divine. So whenever, of course, our whole journey is that we are born because we are imperfect. Let's confess to that. We come here to work out our karmas only, right? That's the whole thing. So the soul has to break through all this and know its identity with God. So I feel Vedanta is not, and the other thing is it's both consciously or unconsciously. Everybody is going towards that. So Vedanta makes it more conscious. That's it. So yeah, that's how I think. I don't think I'll be able to go without Vedanta, because the whole life of man is based on Vedanta in general. Yeah, for those who are conscious of it in particularly, yes. So I think it's all about Vedanta only.
Wonderful.
That's how, like, yeah.
Yeah, I want to contextualize what you said. You shared very very interesting insights, and for the benefit of viewers, the best part of a Vedanta, it does not call upon humans as sinners. It says that we are imperfect, fine, but we are also traveling towards perfection, and perfection in the form of divinity lies inside us. And this Indian thought, this is a very powerful thought, and this is completely different from what we see in Abrahamic religions, especially the Christian theology, etc., wherein the basis of the religion starts with the notion of sin. And I think when Swami Vivekananda was there, with, there was a huge Christian onslaught on Hindu dharma. There was the intellectual onslaught, and Swami Vivekananda's roaring message. I remember reading his words. Strength is power, and strength is life, and weakness is death. I think so. These kind of messages, uh, you know, uh, this saved Hindu Dharma, and not just that. This is important to understand, because today we tend to believe that all religions are same, all religions are equal, all religions preach same. But this is not so. There are fundamental doctrinal, philosophical differences. So with this, I want to you spoke about Swami Vivekananda's your own journey, internal journey to Vedanta. But I also want to know, and I am sure viewers want to know, the your external journey as well. I'm especially interested to hear about um, your travels in Himalayas, your meeting with the different teachers of Vedanta, different monks, as well as your. I know that you have been involved in social work, and you have your own NGO. You run an NGO, and you were also active in politics for some time. So, tell us how Vedanta and Swami Vivekananda's teachings have guided you in your social work and in your political work, and what inspired you to take up these fields as well. So, yeah, please do share. And before I leave you to answer, viewers, you ask your questions now in the question and answer chat box. After another 10 minutes, Navina will take up these questions. I will ask some of them to him. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think I'll go to the first part of your statement about that Abrahamic religions, basically Christians and all, talking about man as sinners. So yeah, Swamiji actually, when he was in lecturing in the United States, he said, sinners, it is a sin to call a man so. You're all divine. He said, it's a sin to call a man sinner. That's the only sin. If there is any sin, it is to call a man as sinner. So Vedanta takes the opposite position. It takes you are God. What you call as imperfection does not belong to you. You are separate from it. So that was the counterpoint we have for the Christian philosophy that we are sinners. But if you take out that philosophical part of it, so what Ramakrishna and Vivekananda did, so yes, you said that all religions are not same. See, Sri Ramakrishna said that every religion has error. So he didn't say that the Hindu Dharma is the perfect. He didn't, though he was a Sanatani, he was truly, but he said every religion has error. And he said, it is not for us to do that. It's the God himself has created this to suit different people, different temperaments, different climate. And he said, whoever has the yearning for God, whoever has that yearning for God, he will get God. Whether he's a Muslim, whether he's a Christian, he may be an atheist also. But whoever has that, feeling to break free. So that you call it as God objectively, or just to become free, as Buddha did. So Vedanta again, see, we have to accept everything. So Vedanta does not stand as an exclusive philosophy outside the fold of, say, Christianity or Islam. So we accept everything. Vedanta accepts everything. It accepts Christianity, it accepts Islam, it accepts everything. And we give a rightful place to all these religions. That's very important to understand. Vedanta, we are not becoming exclusive sect. Vedanta, we are an inclusive sect. So Vedanta has to explain the entire creation. So if you talk about evolution from amoeba to the Buddha and the realized one, so that includes everything between these two extremes, from amoeba to that highest realized saint. And that includes atheists, theists, Islams, Christianity. We should include everybody, and we must accord a place for everyone. So there will be some differences owing to the climate or temperament. Uh, that's bound to be there. See, me and you are different. I myself disagree with you on so many things. but, but I'm talking to you.
See, what you're saying, it reminds me one verse by Sri Gaudapadacharya in his Mandukya Karika, wherein he says the dualists, counter each other and refute each other, but Advaitins have no conflict with anybody. This is what you're saying. But tell me about we are almost towards the end of the session.
Okay.
So tell me about your, the social work and the political aspect. You were in politics, active politics for a few years, I think, and you have been in social for a long time. What inspired you, and how did Vedanta? Is it the Vedanta? Is it the Karma Yoga that inspired your decisions in these fields? And what did you learn, and how did this happen?
Yeah, I am going to take an excuse from you. One particular paragraph I want to read out because I
Yes.
think this is very important for everybody because
Hmm.
this speaks about universality. Yes,
Hmm.
from this book itself, I'm taking it out.
Okay,
Yeah, this
great.
one paragraph. This is what Vivekananda said in the Parliament of Religions in Chicago.
Hmm.
I just quote this. He said, if there is ever to be a universal religion, it must be one which will have no location in place or time, which will be infinite like the God it will preach, and whose sun will shine upon the followers of Krishna and of Christ. It's very important. Which will be infinite like the God it will preach, and whose sun will shine upon the followers of Krishna and of Christ, on saints and sinners alike, which will not be Brahminic or Buddhistic, Christian or Mohammedan, but the sum total of all these, and still have infinite space for development, which in its Catholicity will embrace in its infinite arms and find a place for every human being, from the lowest groveling savage, not far removed from the brute, to the highest man, towering by the virtues of his head and heart, almost above humanity, making society stand in awe of him and doubt his human nature. It will be a religion which will have no place for persecution or intolerance in its polity, which will recognize divinity in every man and woman, and whose whole scope, whose whole force will be created in aiding humanity to realize its true divine nature. This wonderfully is summed up the Vedanta basically. So we have to accept, my whole contention here is that whatever the differences we have to recognize Vedanta as a philosophy which is going to lift, as Vivekananda said, a brute unto man and man unto God. And this is a very broad conception of humanity, not about one religion. So I think when you talk of Vedanta, it's not right to sectarianize or geographize to a certain particular place. As I said, no location is space or time. It must be universal. So I
I
think
think
we will,
the very nature of Sanatana Dharma is that it is applicable to everyone. It is the very name is perpetual dharma. And I remember another quote which is, we do not travel from falsehood to truth, but from lower truth to truth, lower truth,
yes,
lower to the truth.
higher to
Yes. So it's wonderful. I think we can keep
yeah,
discussing these quotes forever and ever. And you still did not take up the question on your
yeah,
involvement in
politics, yeah,
politics. And this is
yeah,
the third time I'm asking, so please
no, I'll take up.
answer that.
Yeah. So I will take up just two questions of that. Yeah, politics. I was in politics. I was a member of Lok Sabha party. Actually, it was a secular party, so to say. There's a lot of talk about secular party, but see, Vedanta. Of course, it is the one thing that influences me wherever I go, because Vedanta does not leave out anything. It takes all aspects of human life. So politics also is one of the aspects where Vivekananda said, whatever developments we see around us, it's all expression of divinity only. So even in politics, the spirit is expressing itself, according to the needs of time, the place. So I had that philosophical background when I went to politics, and to the extent possible, I tried to not to bring religion there. And but yeah, there were a couple of problems. The party them itself was not very serious, as I was serious about the party. Eventually, they closed down the party now. I mean, I feel there's a problem with the Indian leaders. Uh, they take up something, but they don't take it to a logical conclusion. When you start a party, you must hold on to it. There are millions, thousands of people supporting you, following you, contributing in every possible way. See, the in Krishna's message, to work you have the right, not to results thereof. See, the political party was started with a great intention. Why should you bother about the results? You are doing work, people are not recognizing, that's all right. What is there for you to lose? You're doing your best, and if people don't choose you, that's fine. What is there for you to lose? But you have to keep fighting. And I felt that our party had lacked the direction and purpose, but they started it, and I think a lot of people who were behind the party supported day and night, worked for it. They were all let down. And anyway, it was not the yeah. I came out of the party just before they closed the party itself as political unit.
Okay.
Yeah, that was one part of it. But anyway, I must say that the party had a wonderful philosophy. That's what actually drew me to the party. It had great volunteers. When the leader was a wonderful man, but only thing is that we didn't know how to lead an organization. That was the whole problem there. So anyway, I had to come out because it was creating a lot of conflicts for me spiritually and with my Vivekananda orientation and the politics not recognizing that Vivekananda's philosophy as something that could actually benefit the party and to the country. So that's where I had a conflict with the party. Then I told, no, I can't actually continue here. So I came out. Ever since then, I'm not politically active now. So because I don't find a place for myself in politics currently, maybe you can say that. So I thought maybe in future the time comes. I'm open to that. I spoke to my Guruji also, Gautam Anandji Maharaj. Yes, told me, okay, you can join. So, but as of now, I'm not thinking of politics as such. I spent 2 months in in Shivananda Ashrama, Rishikesh. I was in stay for 2 months. I was undertaking a course called Yoga Vedanta course. They have a
Okay.
course basically. Anybody can join. It's a free of course, 2 months residential course started by His Holiness Swami Shivananji Maharaj and his disciple Swami Chidananda. They were one of the two greatest monks I personally feel like, that our country has produced. So it's a wonderful course to take. I was in the banks of the river Ganges for 2 months to be in that holy atmosphere. I think it really helped me a lot. And Vipassana is one meditation course I took. It's a Buddhistic meditation technique. It's also a very good technique. Even they have 10 days course, 20 days course. So
Do you
maybe I
practice them now also? Do you practice this?
Vipassana, I don't practice now because I felt that it does not suit my type of temperament. I'm also I'm a Hindu basically. You see, I like music, I like bhajans, I like this chanting mantras and all. I'm very fond of them. So there, it's more of a going just to the witness kind of a study of subjects, which doesn't go well with my temperament. So I really like the technique. I suggest my people, my friend, my sister also. She joined the course now. She's practicing it. I think for me, it's not the right type of technique. So I don't, I mean, I have a lot of respect for it and I really got benefit by that. But I think I'm more into the, work on the way of harmonizing the yogas and do all that stuff. So I think I'm more comfortable and more at home in this, I think so. And if you talk about my
Okay.
travels, yeah, Himalaya is a great place to visit. I think everybody should visit that Chardham, that Gangotri, Yamunotri, Amarnath in particular. Amarnath, Vivekananda had the darshan of Lord Amarnath there. And he said he feels as if Amarnath came and sat on his shoulders. He said after coming from there. And it's a great journey, Amarnath. Gomukh and the birthplace of Mother Ganga. So those Rudranath actually was really wonderful. I think Hindus in general, because we are religious, and these places we must explore. I mean, there's a great spiritual benefit we get from going there. Physically, of course, it's going to help you, but more than that, the spiritual, you'll get so many insights. Just as you travel, Rudranath, I was going, and I was getting so many thoughts on the Advaita Vedanta at that time. So it's very naturally you feel that. See, here we have to intellectualize, rationalize, think, debate, and all that, and it's not a realization yet. But when you go to this, pilgrimage place, especially on the Himalayas, you will have a wonderful benefit, and you can't describe that. I'm missing it this year very badly. so, so next year, I hope I'll be able to go, and I really miss it. And Himalaya should be a place because you see, historically also, it's for us. In every way, Himalaya has been our father. It's protecting us from a long time. That's for the sages, for the Vedic seers. I mean, it's a place basically. So I suggest that everybody should explore the Himalayas. Definitely,
Wonderful.
especially this Chardham and this Amarnath, Rudranath also. I would add to that list. The wonderful places to go.
Wonderful. We have few questions from the audience. I'll just quickly read it out. There are two questions from Babu Amaraneni. Says, how useful is technology for a spiritual seeker? And the second question is, goal is to manifest the divinity. Please share any practical tips, for those, to try to achieve this goal. And I just want to add, there is another question about whether Vedanta is same or different from the Upanishads. Upanishad is Vedanta, and Vedanta means the crown or the zenith of Veda, which is Upanishad. So that's a very basic thing. You can just Google it out and you can find the answer. So can you take up these two questions? One about the technology and the practical tips, how to manifest, how to work towards the goal that to manifest divinity in life.
Yeah, the first question he has asked about spirituality and how it can be, helped by technology.
Yeah, whether it is useful, distractive. What's your view on that?
See, spirituality does not require technology, is my opinion, basically. Because if you look at any of our great saints we had, that Sri Ramakrishna, Shankaracharya, or any of these, so spirituality is more to do with your spiritual practices and manifesting it in actions. In which way it can help in the sense, say, Saropriyanandji is giving wonderful talks on the Vedanta. So if you can pick up those ideas, I think if you ask me about spirituality, yes, I don't associate much technology with spirituality because I think spirituality is the unfoldment of the inner being, and we have to undergo certain spiritual disciplines for that. So it's more on the subjective side. So I'm not sure whether technology can really help much in the spiritual journey. Save as, occasionally you can get some, you can interact with some evolved monks who maybe say Salopriyananji is in US, New York currently. So you can talk to him. So maybe except for these guidances, I think spirituality is more of a subjective journey. An individual has to, he has to struggle hard within himself. And that's why whenever we talk of sadhana, people go to seclusion. They go to Himalayas and they go to caves. So because it's an internal journey and you have to shut yourself from everything outside. That is my take on spirituality. I don't know if the question was for this spirituality. I'm not sure. But if you talk about service, yes, technology has a great role to play in service. Imagine Vivekananda was writing letters from US. It used to take 15 days to come to India, more than that. And suppose he had that email we have current. I was just thinking so many times, if Swamiji was able to write emails, what wonderful effect it would have created. And I think we are actually very fortunate to have this technology today, which we are not utilizing properly. So if you talk to me about the work part, yes, there is wonderful things we can do with technology. And Babu Amarnani himself is actually running a channel called Vivek Vani. He has got more than 50,000 subscribers and they are getting a great benefit. Actually, I had call from some of them. They're telling me that their life has been changed because of the videos they saw in that particular channel, Vivek Vani. So see, if you look at that kind of an impact, what content you're going to give to the audience, and if it can at the point exactly they need, so that will be a great help. But it requires a lot of like you have done the work already, identifying suitable small videos, but it will be having that impact. So if we can communicate such kind of thoughts all over the world, I think, yeah, as a work, as a dissemination of spiritual knowledge, uh, technologies have a great help. But if we talk about a subjective journey towards that highest reality, I feel we have to go deep into ourselves. And the second part of the question was, can you just repeat that?
Yeah, the second part was basically practical tips for a spiritual for seeker. The goal is to manifest the divinity. I mean, that is the goal of all sadhana. So, any practical tips that you can share?
Yeah, I feel to become more and more aware of ourselves. That's the entire essence of the that spiritual sadhana. Divinity also comes only when we are able to uh, become aware of ourselves. Every moment, if I am aware of myself, that is the greatest thing. So I think we have to practice awareness to not let a single thought escape our attention, and to be fully conscious of the divinity within, and that we have to see divinity outside. This is a lifetime work. See, I can talk about this today because connected to such audience now. But I know it's a very difficult thing to be conscious of one's own divinity, and also to see, or at least to remember that idea that everybody is divine around us. The entire universe is one. Swami Vivekananda would say the universe is objectified God. So you see, it's wonderful to read, but the moment you go out and you lost that idea basically. So I think we have to practice this consciously, and I think that's the only way, in my opinion.
Wonderful, Navina. Your words reminded me. I mean, it's so interesting. You mentioned about the statement that the world is a objectified God, right? You will find a very similar or exactly same in a Sanskrit, by Shankaracharya um, in his commentary on Isha of the Upanishad in the first Shanti mantra, wherein Purnamada Purnamidam Shanti mantra, he says exactly this. The what we
Yes.
are perceiving as Jagat is actually Brahman itself. The objectified Brahman. It's wonderful how we can relate to these ideas. Two people spread across ages for 1,000 plus years. It's wonderful. I think that is why we are called Sanatan Dharma, and we should be very proud that we are our punyas are such that we are born in Sanatan Dharma. We are born to appreciate Vedanta. So, and with this, we come to conclusion of this session. And on the
Okay.
behalf of all the audience, on behalf of Advaita Academy, I thank you for accepting our invitation, coming on our show, sharing about your life, about your Swami Vivekananda, his teachings with us. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Nitin. Babu, I think should answer your question I need more time. I'll talk to you personally about that question because that manifesting divinity, it can be in various ways, but I just, because lack of time also, I can't go to the specifics of what can be the ways. Anyway, we can discuss it. And thank you, Nitin, and you're doing a great work. I just wanted to congratulate you also because as I saw you as a student, you were studying engineering that time. You have gone
Yes.
through a lot, and I'm very happy to see the progress you have made. Recently, I noticed that Narendra Modi is following you on Twitter. So I was really happy to know that because you have gone to that stage and your books have been really appreciated by many people. Though I am not, much into the dharmic side of it in the sense the day-to-day the dharma. So I'm more into philosophical aspect of it. You're also into that, but I'm more streamlined, you can say, sort of at intellectual level, but you are into everything almost, let's say, society. So, and I see that you're doing a great work. I always saw that you could do great work. I openly told that also. So I wish you all the best and do continue to be led by your internal God. I think is guiding you already. So may that help
Thank you
your.
very much. Yes, I'm very touched by your encouraging and blessings and comments, and thank you very much. Viewers, do not forget to buy the book of Navina. It's available on Amazon. It's available. You can directly purchase it from him as well. He's very approachable in Facebook and other platforms. Do buy his book, read it, share it with all your friends and family. We come to a conclusion with this at another session of Weekend Conversations, and we will soon bring new, more, and other sessions like this. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, Advaita Academy. Follow us on YouTube channel. We have a website also. You just type in Advaita Academy into Google, you will get all the links. Thank you very much. Shri Guru Pyo Namaha.